Okay, so when I bought my GSP 500s, having read some of the negative reviews and some of the promise people had, I wanted to make sure that I would be able to have the best experience possible with the new headset. So I bought Sennheiser's DAC, which is the GSX 1000. I also compared it to the GSX 1200, and there's really no difference that I could tell between the two other than maybe a newer model. There was a price difference of quite a lot on that, so I know there are some more differences, but ultimately the price was the main difference. So $180 on Amazon. Now, part of the reason that I never had an issue before was this little guy. This is the inline amplifier for my previous headset, the Tritons. Now on the front, it's a little hard to see here, but I've got front, rear, mic muting, as well as center and sub adjustments, and then the power and amplification range. And with that, you could dial in all of the different channels specific to what you wanted to do. Once you had it set, you could kind of forget about it. You couldn't really adjust it for each individual game you wanted to play or movie you wanted to watch or anything like that, which was a little bit annoying, but you could get a good jack of all trades setting on it, and it worked very well. Now the GSX 1000 is a similar type of device. It looks really good. I love the look of this. You've got this old school volume dial here, the silver piece around it. It moves with virtually no friction. It's got a good amount of resistance to it, but it won't just freely spin. This feels like a classic old receiver dial from a 1950s, 60s style receiver, and this is fantastic. I love that feel. On the center portion here, you have your information display. I'll boot it up here in just a second. We'll take a look at that. And then these four little capacitive buttons on the side are presets that you can do. So you can set up a couple presets. So I had a music preset, a movies preset, default gaming preset, and then a tweaked, I need to hear certain things type of game preset. I never used that. I found that balancing between movie and my generic game mode worked the best for me. But again, we'll take a look at that in a second. Connection-wise, you just have a USB input for the computer, you have your bypass to go out to speakers, your microphone in, and your earphone in. Now, I have very mixed feelings about this device, and I did not use it up front. I started by running the GSP 500 straight through my onboard sound card because I knew I had the amplifier on there, and I knew that I had a sound card in the Sound Blaster Cinema 2, which is the onboard setup that I'm running right now. So I started with that to say, okay, this is my baseline. What does the DAC give me that I don't have already through a high quality sound card and a system the way it is currently configured? So I hooked it up. I went online and started looking through the instruction manual. The definitions of what some of the settings were and what they did honestly weren't the best. There's not tons of options, so it's not like you can't just push a button 2-3 times and figure out what it does. But when I went through and started doing that, I was a little surprised at the way things kind of turned out. The fake surround through this was a little surprising. So you go into your computer, you need to make sure that you've set the GSX 1000 speakers, not headset, to be output to the 7.1 surround. If you do the headset, you're limited to a 16,000 hertz, which is just terrible. Whereas if you use the GSX speakers, you're able to get up to 48,000 hertz for 7.1 surround. And the surround setting in there was a little weird because I had tested the onboard surround, which worked like a normal surround and normal virtual surround in my opinion, where it just kind of added some more ambiance to the sound and maybe moved some of the footsteps around. And I mentioned how some of the center channels in certain games doesn't quite work right because it's all digital and fake. But with this, I ran into specific issues in certain games. So in PUBG, let's say right now, me to the camera here is about 10-12 feet. I had to be about that far away from somebody to really hear their footsteps in any sort of action situation. Whereas through my old headset, I could hear, depending on what they're running on, if they're running across the wood floor of a house, I could hear them echoing maybe 30-40 feet away. In the onboard solution with the GSP 500s, it was about 25-35 feet away, and it sounded very natural, and I could hear the thud, 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 and it sounded really good. Through these, once I got really close, it sounded good, but the distance was lost, and it didn't feel like a natural distance because when I turned it over to 2D, the audio level went down and I cranked the volume back up, I was able to hear the distance again. So it's something in the way it's processing the surround sound that I didn't like. Fast forward and jump into GTA. In Grand Theft Auto, you're cruising down the road, you've got the radio playing, you've got all the ambiance around you. This did a great job with the environment, but focused audio was terrible because the radio, I could almost not hear it. You could hear it in certain songs and things you could play and you could hear it, but if you tried to turn it up to hear it more, the ambience around you got really oppressive. Now again, you could tweak certain settings to make the radio sound good, but then the rest of the game doesn't sound great. I couldn't come up with a very good balance between everything. And one of the main settings is reverberation. So reverberation, in their description, was the way of faking the large scale environment. So if you're indoors, you want low reverberation because there's not a large output of the world that's out there. So you need the sound to kind of dampen as it hits the walls. When you're out in the world, there's a lot of reverberation and sound coming into you, so you want to turn it up. In Grand Theft Auto, you spend all your time outdoors, so you have the reverberation up, and it sounds great. When I was flying my Akula helicopter through the world, or any helicopter really, you could really hear the doof, 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 doof of those blades moving by, and you can almost hear supercharger whine from the turbines in the engine going as it was flying, and it was a really awesome experience to hear that. Through the onboard, I can hear it, but it's a very subtle effect, whereas in this, that was a really boom, boom. I felt like I was in that helicopter, and it was a good feeling. But the radio, the cell phone, and some of the other sounds were muted, and it just came across as very fake. And that was part of the problem with PUBG. It really didn't sound correct, I guess is the best way to do it. And again, there's only finite number of settings you can play with on here, and I played with all of them for about a week. I used this for about 5-6 days on its own, and then I used this with this for about 5-6 days, and either this unit's defective or that's the way they intended it. Playing movies, no problems. Playing music, just flip it into 2D mode, no big deal. Even in 7.1, music sounded pretty good because it filled in a lot of the space around you, and it really sounded good for 7.1 music. Watching movies, TV shows, everything like that sounded really good through this. I had no problems with that. But when I jumped into playing games and things like that that had sound, it was very hard to get it working. In Grand Theft Auto, I switched the output from headphones over to surround, and it improved it a little bit, but it wasn't enough to make it that good. Which leads me into kind of, I'm not sure what the purpose of this device is in that regard, specific to if you have a good quality onboard sound. If you really don't have any good onboard sound, like you don't have a higher end motherboard that has a separate chip for sound processing, or you're running off of a basic laptop or tablet or something like that, this is going to be a great device for you. And I'm really not saying that it is a terrible device, but for $180, I expected a little better from a DAC. Honestly, I was surprised that this would output that kind of muddled tones. What really kind of drew my conclusion on it finally was I noticed in certain scenes where there was a lot of different sound inputs and a lot of frequency range, especially in 7.1 mode, it got confused and muddled. And I did not have that problem when it was plugged straight into the motherboard through a full analog signal. And what I mean by that was there were moments where, say, something would explode in the distance and somebody would be talking and the wrong sound was amplified and the wrong sound got muted. So something would blow up and I'd hear this kind of, the explosion, instead of being loud, would kind of, you'd see it. It's hard to describe, but the best way I can think of would be like somebody turning the volume down on just that explosion. It was weird, and it happened in multiple situations. I'm driving a car and I would crash into something in PUBG, and the thunk and the crash of the sound would be like somebody turning a volume knob down, almost as if it's trying to keep it from clipping. But why would it be clipping? The volume isn't set that loud. I tried turning this down a bit and I still got it at lower volume output, and it was just really disconcerting to hear that. A grenade would go off at the same time somebody's talking in Discord, and both would kind of get turned down while the environment got turned up. It was just confusing. The other problem I had with this, there's two main problems. The other one was in Windows 7, I cannot get HD mode to work properly because this is supposed to be able to do HD audio in 2 channels. So 96,000 hertz is HD audio, and it's supposed to be capable of doing that. I cannot get that setting to unlock at all in Windows 7. In Windows 10, plug it in, it registers it, no problem. So I don't know why it's locked into Windows 10 When Windows 7 through analog, I can do up to 128,000 hertz. Can't really hear most of that, but it's capable of doing it. I'm just surprised that it doesn't work. Now the main issue, which I even reached out to their support line for, is the microphone here. When we were talking about just the GSPs, and I talked about how I use the microphone in the headset to kind of play backup for streaming. It's my main streaming mic, just more of a backup when I'm doing offline recordings. And as such, I want to have the more rich tones to the voice. Apparently, this DAC and a lot of other DACs specifically tied to headsets. I don't know if third-party ones do the same thing, but they limit the microphone to one channel, 16-bit, 16,000 hertz, which is very surprising, especially because Sennheiser is supposed to be synonymous with really high quality. And to be perfectly clear, it's not bad audio per se, but the way it's described is tape deck or FM radio quality, not HDA radio, standard FM. That's 70s and 80s technology. Tape decks. Most of the audience out there probably doesn't even know what a tape deck is or doesn't even know what they sound like. I still have cassette tapes upstairs. I might even still have one of my old Walkmans upstairs too. I know the sound of a tape. It's not bad, but it ain't great, especially when you compare it with the standards of CD, 44.1, DVD, 48,000, standard studio recording, or standard main vocal recording, 96,000 and 128,000. To be fair, the human voice is limited to a very small fraction of that range. But the reason you have the ability to record that is the surrounding environment. You don't want to capture a lot of different things. Now, I'm in a large room here, so if I sounded like I was muffled and talking like this, like I'm doing a voiceover with all deadened sound, it wouldn't come across quite right. What you're hearing is the potential refrigerator, maybe the dishwasher. You're hearing everything else in the room around it, and that's filling up the rest of the soundscape, and it creates a larger, more open environment that sounds natural and good. Now, to be clear, that's also part of your voice, and we're talking specifically about sample rate, which is how fast my voice and my speaking is being sampled. Think of it, and now this is not going to be the perfect, I'm probably going to get chewed out in the comments from audiophiles and other things, but the best way to think of it is looking at like anti-aliasing in games. A computer cannot draw a circle, so if you tried to draw this circle, a computer can't do that. A human can just simply go, I want to do a circle. To digitize that, you have to deal with lines. So it does over, down, over, down, over, down, over, down, over, down a lot to make this appear a circle in a computer. That's why if you look at the edge of a leaf or any type of rounded object in a video game, it looks jagged. If you turn on anti-aliasing, what you're doing is you're making that jagged edge have more geometry to it. It's not that you're making it round, you're just adding more lines. The more lines you add, the better it looks, the more crisp and round it looks. Same thing with audio. If you go back to digital versus analog, you're creating bars of sound versus a smooth waveform. That may be why people prefer records, or are starting to go back to preferring records to digital sound. But in the sample rate, you're grabbing more audio from it, so there's a more smooth transition between the pits and the falls and the valleys and the rises. So for me personally, 16,000 hertz sounds very digital, and it sounds like there's lost audio in there. It makes you sound kind of tinny and hollow. And that's what this does. When I first took the GSP 500s up to my motherboard, none of my friends in Discord knew that I had purchased a new headset. I put it on, I jumped in there and I said, hey guys, what's going on? And I'm like, holy crap, did you get a new headset or did you hook up your better microphone to the computer? Because you sound really crisp and really clear and there's a lot more definition to your voice. That's what they said. And yes, I said, yeah, I've got a new headset. And I'm like, oh, damn, that's nice. When I hooked this up, again, I didn't tell them that I was using this. They called out, what's wrong with your headset? They thought something was wrong with this because I sounded tinny and not as clear. Now, I reached out to Sennheiser support about the issue and asked if they were going to do a firmware update or something like that to get this above that 16,000 hertz. And what they told me was frankly a little, I guess, alarming. Maybe I took it a bit the wrong way, but for a company synonymous with ultra high end quality, and when you spend $180 on a headset that's supposed to be kind of top tier and high end, I expect to get high end across the board. What they told me was 16,000 hertz is good enough. which really did not sit well with me because sure, it's good enough, but you're providing me, I've got a headset capable of doing so much more and you're limiting that headset to crap. I'm sorry, 16,000 hertz is FM quality, tape deck quality. And that answer just did not go over very well with me. So I've got some samples here. Let's take a listen to those. And when you listen to them, there's two things to focus in on. One, focus in on what my voice sounds like. The richness of the tones and the way that the sampling was picked up through the peaks and the valleys of the sound. To be completely fair to this device, the noise cancellation is absolutely phenomenal. So yes, it does sound very good if you're just looking to hear a voice. But if you want to hear a bit more richness and more tone to the voice and what you hear, this device really doesn't sound that good. I sound a bit digital and it sounds like there's aspects missing from the range. So take a listen to the samples. I'll have some subtitles up and I'll play the GSX a few times in there. So I'm going to be comparing it to the onboard solution with the headset plugged into my motherboard, recording in a whole bunch of different ways with noise canceling, gain, and a bunch of stuff tweaked. And then just the GSX 1000 because you can't really change anything with this. It is what it is. Single channel, 16-bit, 16,000 hertz. So let's take a listen to those samples. Okay, noise suppression is still turned off, but I've turned the microphone gain in Windows from +20 to +10 to try and boost the audio a little bit, but I still see a lot of noise in the waveform. Alright, so this time I have noise suppression and acoustic echo cancellation both disabled, but we are at +20 dB. So while my voice is going to sound fairly rich and good, it's going to be hidden behind a lot of noise and static, which is unfortunate. Alright, now I have acoustic echo cancellation turned on, but I am still at only +10 dB gain in Windows. And this time we have acoustic echo cancellation enabled with noise suppression turned off with a +20 dB. I can see a little bit of noise in the waveform, but really not that much. Okay, so now I have noise suppression enabled and acoustic echo cancellation turned off, and I'm still at +10 in Windows. Okay, so now I'm at +20 dB in Windows with only noise suppression on. And you can probably hear some of the digital distortion from having acoustic echo disabled. But the waveform is fairly clean. Alright, and this is noise suppression and acoustic echo cancellation both enabled within the Realtek and Windows drivers, but the +dB is only at 10. So it'll be a little bit quiet and the waveform should be pretty clean. Okay, so now I have noise suppression and acoustic echo cancellation enabled again, and I'm at +20 dB. So the waveform is very clean, there's not a lot of noise, but my voice has also been tweaked a little bit due to the way the Realtek drivers and Windows are handling noise suppression. This is the GSP 500s plugged directly into the GSX 1000, recording in single channel, 16-bit, 16,000 hertz. How do I sound? This is a recording through my Zoom H4n, which is my primary audio recording solution. I'm recording at 24-bit, 96 kilohertz or 96,000 hertz. And you should be able to hear quite a bit of difference in the way my voice and just the tonal inflection, the way you can hear the rises and falls, and the way that the higher sample rate really picks up and fills in the difference between the different peaks and valleys as my voice rises and falls or as I stop and start talking. So hope you can hear the difference. So what do you think? Am I being a bit too harsh on Sennheiser for expecting better than 16,000 hertz in single channel and 16-bit out of a microphone on an $180 DAC? I don't know. Personally for me, I think I am being very just in wanting better because this kit together is $360. I'm sorry, $360 isn't good enough to have technology or a soundscape from the 70s and 80s in there. Yes, tape deck quality is good enough if you're just trying to talk to somebody because it does sound good. The noise canceling in here is just phenomenal and the voice is very clear and you can very well understand what I'm saying, but it doesn't sound right to my ears. And that's not me being some ultra audiophile geek. There's a loss of harmony, there's a loss of richness, there's a loss of warmth to the voice in the lower sample rate. And if, to me, especially when I heard the other sound through the microphone, Yes, there was a bit of static. Yes, there was a bit of noise, but the voice sounded a lot more natural. The peaks and valleys as my voice goes up and down sounded a lot better through the onboard audio. Now, I'm not sure how well all that's going to translate through YouTube compression and all that stuff, so take it with a grain of salt. That was just me. Again, if you don't have a good onboard sound card and you're playing on a laptop or something like that, or low-end onboard audio, you will be very pleased with this device. I'm not going to say that the GSX 1000 is crap, because it's not. I had some problems with it that maybe will turn you off to it. I had thought about reaching out and maybe buying another DAC, but that's another $200. Even if I return this, that's still another $200 to spend. So that's just too much money for the performance that I'm not sure is worth it. I have a good onboard sound card. Even if you have a third party, like another Sound Blaster sound card running through PCI Express or something, a DAC like this isn't really necessary for you. I wanted to like it. I gave it a lot of chances. The surround for movies and audio or music was really good through here. I did hear a difference. It sounded very good, but it was not $180 better than my sound card on my motherboard. And it having an onboard amplifier really makes these earphones pop. So GSX 1000, this is going back. It ain't worth 180 bucks for what I got out of it. That's me personally. So your mileage may vary. All right, so let's take a look at the on-screen settings for the GSX 1000. So let me plug it in. Get the cable oriented right. All right, it should be booting up here. There it goes. Those are all the on-screen options and all the menu settings coming in. Once it finishes installing on the computer, it will go to sleep and should be good to go. If you move your hand over it, it comes up beautifully with a little tactile sensor in there. Again, this device has a lot of things to love, and the presentation on it is very good. So volume knob here turns it in twos all the way up to 99, which is really 100 in Windows, which is what this is controlling. We'll just leave it there. Love the feeling of that. And again, you have your capacitive preset settings on the sides here. So there's the music setting. Oops, if I could push on the button properly, let me do it from the right angle. There we go. There's the movies. There's my primary game setting. And there's my secondary game setting. And you can see how everything kind of goes around and adjusts. So let's talk about what these are. So let's go to music first. Here at the top, you have a headset button. This switches to a speaker. This means I'm using the speaker bypass or going to the headset. Here at the top is the equalizer setting. So that's set to music. There's movie, standard, basic, game, and back to music. Now this is a more talkback feature where you can hear the microphone in the headset a lot, or a little, medium, and a lot. So don't really need to worry about that. And then you can see you're using 2, and then you're using 7.1. So you can cycle back and forth between those settings. Let's go into the movie mode. Now here in the movie mode, you can see it's also set to 7.1. Again, you just simply make the change you want, but now we have the full features available to us. So I've got it set to movie. This option on the side tells you the orientation of the sound, or where the focus is. So this would be focus behind you, focus kind of equal, and focus in front of you. Then over here, we again have a little bit of that mouth feedback. I don't really care about that. I didn't use it. And over here on the left side, this is that reverberation I was talking about. So in a movie mode, I really don't want to hear faux reverberation. I want to just hear the movie itself. Let me keep it from going to sleep. So that's that setting. If I go into my primary game, you can see I have reverb on a lot because pretty much all the games I've been playing are in open world environments. If I do one that's internal, I can just simply push the button and turn the reverb off or give myself a little bit depending on what I want to hear in the game. And all of that works very well. Those settings are very intuitive, very easy to use. They're very simple capacitive touch buttons. To modify a setting, you simply make the change you want, and then when you have it set, you push and hold the capacitive touch button. You can see the edge of it's white. It'll beep at you and blink when you've made the setting. So visually, this presentation is fantastic. This looks great. After a couple seconds, it goes right back to sleep. No big deal. Put your hand over it, it immediately wakes back up. So I love the look, I love the aesthetics, I love the features that are on here, and I love the way that you can tweak the settings so easy. That's something they just really nailed and got done very well. I hope that was interesting, or at least beneficial to folks who are considering this device. Again, if you have crappy onboard audio and you don't really have a good solution, then that's going to work well. I think that the GSP 500s and the 600s were really tuned through the GSX 1000 and the 1200. I do believe that the two work very well together. I saw that through some other reviews. I'm not going to say it's a terrible device. For my needs and my experience, it ain't for me. So thank you for watching. And the next part, we'll be talking about the SteelSeries headset, which I also had some issues with.